Chapter 2: What Comes Down from the Ridge. Cal Pruitt had been a volunteer EMT in Dillon's Creek for 9 years, and in that time he had seen things that would surprise most people. A man who had driven a tractor over his own foot and was more worried about the tractor than the foot. A house fire on Millbrook Road that had taken 3 of the Hensley kids and left their father standing in the yard in his pajamas looking at the sky. He'd held people's hands while they died, and he'd held people's hands while they decided not to. He knew what a bad day looked like. The morning of November 14th started like a good day. Cold and clear, the Beartooth ridgeline white against the blue sky, the town going about its business with the unhurried competence of a place that had been doing this a long time. Cal opened the station at 7, did the equipment check, drank his coffee standing at the window watching Dillon's Creek wake up. The bakery across the street put its open sign out at 7:15, same as always. Art Phelps walked his arthritic beagle past the station at 7:30, same as always. The school bus made its loop past the hardware store at 7:45. By noon, 3 people had called 911 reporting a car accident on Route 9, the county road that came down from the ridge where the Harrow Institute sat. By 12:30, Cal was driving out to Route 9 with his partner Deb Vasquez, the windows down because the heater in the rig was broken again, and the air was cold enough to keep them alert. "Funny thing about this call," Deb said, looking at her phone. "What's that?" 3 separate people called it in, all from the same quarter-mile of road. Nobody's described the same accident. Cal thought about that. "What do you mean?" "First call, a woman says she saw a truck run off the road, driver looked hurt. Second call, a man says there's a person in the road, lying down, won't move. Third call," Deb scrolled on her phone. "Third call is from Art Phelps. Art was on Route 9. Art was driving out to his brother's place. He says," she paused, "he says there's something wrong with the people out there. He didn't describe an accident. He said something wrong with the people." She looked at Cal. Then the call ended. Cal drove. They found Art Phelps's truck first, pulled to the shoulder, driver's door open. No Art. The road ahead curved around the base of the ridge and out of sight, and from somewhere around that curve came a sound that Cal heard without understanding for a moment. A low sound that he felt more than heard, like a speaker playing a frequency below the range of music. "You hear that?" he said. Deb had gone very still in the passenger seat. "Yeah," she said, "I hear it." He pulled the rig over and they got out, and Cal stood on the cold asphalt and looked up the road. The ridge was above them, white and still, the sky beyond it enormous. The Harrow Institute was up there somewhere, invisible behind its valley. He'd driven past the sign on Route 9 1,000 times. Harrow Agricultural Sciences. He'd never thought much about it. 3 people came around the curve in the road. He saw them from 100 yards and his mind initially arranged them into sense. 3 people, walking down the road toward town, one of them limping. His mind said accident victims because that was what made sense on Route 9 on a morning when 3 people had called in an accident. Then they got closer and his mind stopped helping. The one in front was wearing a Harrow Institute security jacket, dark blue with the company logo on the breast. It was a man, big, wide across the shoulders. He was walking too fast for someone injured, not running, but walking with a driven urgency, like someone late for something. His face was turned toward Cal and Deb and his eyes were open. His eyes were wrong, not in a specific, describable way. Nothing had happened to them that Cal could name. They were just wrong the way a picture of a face is wrong when it's been subtly altered, something missing from behind them that you only notice because you know, looking into human eyes, what's supposed to be there. The 2 behind him moved the same way. A woman in kitchen whites, a man in street clothes. "Get in the rig," Cal said. He said it quietly. He didn't know why he said it quietly. Something in him understood that running and making noise were the wrong responses, and that quietness might buy a few more seconds of not being whatever these 3 things considered a priority. Deb was already moving. He got in after her and put the rig in reverse and looked in the mirror and saw the security guard begin to run. He ran the way the walking had been wrong. Too fast, no wasted movement, the body given over entirely to the single purpose of closing distance. His mouth was open and the sound was coming from him, and Cal could hear it now through the glass. Cal reversed hard and turned and drove back toward town, and didn't look in the mirror again for a long time. He called it in on the way. Dispatch put him through to the county sheriff's office, where he got a deputy named Harms who listened without interrupting while Cal described what he'd seen. And when Cal was done, Harms said, "Vasquez is with you?" "Right here." "Okay. Come back to town, go to the station, lock it down. I'm calling the state." "What is this?" Cal said. "Harms, what is this?" A pause. "I don't know yet. Just get back to town." He got back to town. The woman was waiting in the station parking lot. She was on foot, coming from the direction of Millbrook Road rather than Route 9, and she looked like she'd been through something that would have hospitalized most people. Her clothes torn at the shoulder, a cut above her eye that had bled down her face and dried there, moving with the stiff, careful gait of someone overriding serious pain through concentration. She was wearing the remains of some kind of protective suit, the outer layer stripped off, the inner layer intact. She saw Cal getting out of the rig, and she changed direction toward him and said, "Are you medical?" "EMT," Cal said. "Cal Pruitt." "Elena Marsh. I'm from the Institute." She was looking at him with a focused intensity that had nothing hysterical in it. "How much do you know?" "3 people on Route 9, Cal said. "Wrong. Moving wrong. More than 3 now." She reached him and stopped and put her hands on her knees for a moment, breathing. "How many people in town right now, would you estimate?" "Maybe 800. It's a Thursday." She straightened and looked at him. The cut above her eye was still seeping and she didn't appear to notice. "Here's what I need you to understand. The people you saw on Route 9, they're infectious. Contact with their blood, saliva, or tissue is a transmission route. You cannot restrain them without protection. You cannot help them. I need you to understand that second part." "Can't help them," Cal said. Because they're dead," Elena said. "Clinically, neurologically, cardiac and respiratory function have ceased and restarted on a purely mechanical level. Whatever is animating them isn't a recoverable condition." Deb beside Cal said nothing. She was very white. "How many?" Cal said. "From the Institute, potentially 30. Elena's voice stayed level. She had clearly said difficult things out loud before. "I got 11 people out. The rest..." She stopped. "Some of them will be on the road. Some may have reached town already." "Reach town," Deb repeated. "They walk from the ridge to town in how long?" "Fast walkers," Elena said. "An hour, maybe less." Cal looked at the sky. It was maybe 2 in the afternoon. The day was still blue and cold and unreasonably ordinary looking. He looked at Main Street, which was going about its business with its usual Thursday unconcern. A woman pushing a stroller, 2 pickups parked outside the hardware store, the school bus doing its afternoon loop. The school bus. "The elementary school," he said. "Let out at 3. Elena followed his look. "Go," she said. "I'll be right behind you." The next 4 hours were the worst of Cal Pruitt's life and also, he would think later, the clearest. Emergencies had always done that to him, stripped everything unnecessary away and left only the immediate problem and the immediate solution. He'd found that out the first time he'd worked a serious accident, and it had turned out to be the thing that made him good at this job. He got the school. He got all 41 kids and their teachers into the community center on Arch Street, which was a solid building with 2 exits he could cover and enough room to keep people calm. He coordinated with Deputy Harms on the radio. State response had been initiated, ETA of 4 hours, which was 4 hours too long. He and Harms and 2 other deputies moved through town on foot, moving people off the streets, closing things down, trying to do it quickly and quietly enough not to spark a panic and loudly enough to be effective. The infected arrived at 3:20. Not 30, not from the Institute alone. Cal counted 9 in the first wave and then stopped counting because the number was changing too fast and counting wasn't useful anymore. They came down Millbrook and Route 9 and through the east edge of town where the residential streets backed up against the base of the ridge, and the sound they made moved through Dillon's Creek like a pressure change before a storm. He lost Deputy Harms at 3:45. He didn't see it happen. 1 minute Harms was on the radio, and then the radio was silent, and then 15 minutes later he saw Harms on the far end of Main Street, and Harms was moving wrong. Elena Marsh found him at 4:30, barricaded in the fire station with 26 people. She came in through the side door, which he'd left unlatched for exactly this possibility, a way in that could be watched and controlled, and when she came in she was moving carefully, one arm held against her side. "Show me," Cal said. She shook her head. "It doesn't matter." "Elena." She looked at him for a moment, then she moved her arm and he saw the tear in the inner suit at her forearm, and below the tear a red mark that could have been a scratch and almost certainly wasn't. "How long ago?" he said. 40 minutes. She sat down on a bench beside the engine bay and for the first time since he'd met her that morning she looked tired. "I wanted to get as many people to safety as I could first." He sat beside her. Around them, 26 people, the school secretary, 3 of the teachers, a handful of parents who'd shown up for pickup and never left, the Hensley man from Millbrook whose 3 kids had died in the fire years ago and who had apparently decided he was not going to lose anything else, a dozen others, sat or stood in small groups and talked quietly and tried not to look at Cal and Elena. "Tell me what I need to know," Cal said. She told him. She told him about the prion, about the progression, about the timeline. She told him about the fracture in the seal and the yellow indicator, and the decision she'd made that morning that she'd been carrying all day. She told him without self-pity or evasion, the way a scientist presents findings. Here is the data, here is what it means, here is what I did wrong. "The state response," she said. "When they get here, they'll have containment gear and protocols. What they won't have is local knowledge. They won't know the layout of the town, which buildings are defensible, where the infected are concentrating." "That's what I'm for," Cal said. "That's what you're for." She looked at the side door, then back at him. "I have maybe 2 hours before symptoms start. I'd like to use them." "Elena." 2 hours, she said. "Tell me about the town." She lasted 3. He had to give her that. She lasted 3 hours and she used all of them. She knew things that the arriving state response teams wouldn't know, technical things about what they were dealing with and how it moved and what it feared. And she spent those 3 hours getting that knowledge out of her head and into radios and written notes, and Cal's memory. She organized the community center into a proper shelter. She drafted a containment perimeter recommendation for the state teams based on the infected's apparent movement patterns that Cal would later be told had saved the perimeter operation hours. She did all of this with the steadiness of someone who had decided what the next few hours were going to look like and had made peace with it. At 7:40, she asked Cal to take her to the back of the fire station, to the equipment bay away from the others, and he did. She sat against the wall. The symptoms had started in earnest an hour ago, and she was managing them through what appeared to be pure will. But the will was running out now, and she knew it, and so did he. "My sister is in Bozeman," Elena said. "Her name is Vera. I'd like someone to tell her what happened." "I'll tell her," Cal said. "Tell her I was trying to get home for Christmas." A pause. "Tell her I was good at my job." "You were," Cal said. "You were the best I've seen." She looked at him. Her eyes were still her eyes, still that focused, clear intelligence. For how much longer, he couldn't say. "You're going to be okay," she said. "This town is going to be okay. The state teams are good. You give them my notes and they'll know what to do." "Elena, go back to your people," she said. "Lock the bay door from the outside." He looked at her for a long moment. She met his gaze and didn't look away. He went back to his people. He locked the door. He stood with his back against it for a while, listening, and when the sound started, he walked away. The state response teams arrived at 8:15. They were good. Elena's notes were thorough. By midnight, the perimeter was established, and the sweep had begun, and Dillon's Creek was lit up like a crime scene under portable floodlights, which Cal supposed was accurate. He sat outside the command tent at 2 in the morning drinking bad coffee and watching the ridgeline, where the Harrow Institute sat dark and silent against the stars. A man from the state response sat beside him eventually, a tired-looking 40-year-old with the bearing of someone who'd done this before, who introduced himself only as Reeves. "You the EMT who coordinated the shelter?" Reeves said. "Yeah. Good work." Cal drank his coffee. "Is it over?" Reeves was quiet for a moment. "The active phase is controlled. The Institute site is another matter. That'll take time." He paused. "The woman who gave us those notes, Marsh. She's in the equipment bay," Cal said. "She asked me to lock it." Reeves nodded slowly. He didn't ask anything else. They sat for a while. The floodlights made the town look flattened and strange, all the familiar shapes robbed of their depth. Main Street, the bakery, the hardware store, the places he'd driven past every day of his life. They looked like a photograph of themselves. "How many?" Cal said. "Town?" Reeves considered. "Preliminary, 14 confirmed. We're still sweeping." 14. In a town of 800. He thought about harms on the radio, and then harms on Main Street. He thought about Art Phelps's truck with the door hanging open. He thought about the Hensley man in the community center who had held it together all day and had cried, silently, in a corner when it was over. "Could have been worse," Reeves said. Cal looked at him. Then he looked back at the ridge. "Yeah," he said. "I know." He finished his coffee. He sat for a long time in the cold, watching the ridgeline, and after a while the eastern sky began to lighten by degrees, gray to pale gold to something that was almost pink, and Dillon's Creek sat under it in its floodlights, and its damage, and its survival, breathing. Cal watched the light come. He didn't know yet what the tests would show. The state teams had taken samples from everyone who'd been in contact with the infected, and those results were 48 hours away. And there was a scratch on his forearm from the fencing on Millbrook Road that he hadn't mentioned to anyone, a scratch that was probably nothing, almost certainly nothing. He watched the light come and he thought about Elena Marsh, who had been good at her job, and about his sister in Bozeman whom he hadn't visited enough, and about the town behind him which was still, and probably, there. He thought about the scratch on his forearm. He didn't look at it. He watched the light come instead, and he let the morning decide what it was going to be.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.